will only be filmed from behind where they are seated, and their faces will not be visible. So can I just check if there's any objections? Okay. Thank you. Now, I say this most meetings, members, but do we need a refresher on how to use the Cue to Speak system? So you press it if you want to enter the conversation. I'll then call you here. Don't press your button again. So you wait for it to go. Councillor Bull, I was just asking if anyone wanted a refresher on the Cue to Speak system. Right. That's true. That's it. Okay, that's fine. And look, finally, just for members, at the end of the meeting, we will be having a briefing on enforcement matters, again from Andy, my namesake over there. Thank you. Right, I think we'll begin the formal agenda. Claire, who is with us today, can I have apologies for absence, please, Claire?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've had apologies for absence from Councillor Marilyn Sayer. And Councillor John London is also unable to attend. Councillor Phil Whittam is not yet with us, but may join us if he does arrive in time for the start of the application.
Thank you, Claire. Can I see if there are any substitutes first? Councillor Armitage? Yeah. Yes, Councillor Armitage substituting for Councillor Marilyn. Thank you very much indeed. I always read this, if I can, verbatim, declarations of interest, and members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest, any registerable or non-registerable interest which they have in any item of business on the agenda, and that should be no later than when that item is reached and when appropriate to leave the meeting prior to discussion and voting on the item. Does anyone want to declare any? Councillor Hood.
Thank you. As before, I want to make it clear that I am a member of Newmarket Town Council. I'm chair of the Development and Planning Committee, and I have participated in the Newmarket Town Council decision on this matter, but I am attending here in my role as a member of this committee, and in the interests of openness and transparency, I've been advised that I need to make that declaration, but I will keep an open mind and listen to the debate prior to voting on this item. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hood, for declaring that in the interests of openness and transparency. From what you've said, and provided you have an open mind, I don't see that precludes you from taking part today.
I will now go back to item 3 on the agenda, which is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. I do have this tendency to go ahead of myself at times. So could I see whether there are any corrections to the minutes? No, I couldn't find any either. So could I have a proposer for the minutes, please? Councillor Marmay-White, and a seconder, please, Councillor Don Waldron. So the minutes are proposed by Councillor Marmay-White and seconded by Councillor Waldron. Could I see a show of hands in favour of the minutes, please?
So that appears to be unanimous, and the motion is carried and the minutes are approved.
Thank you, Claire. And now we move to the application for 8 Park Lane, and I will invite Savannah to make a presentation, her presentation when she's ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. So this application seeks planning permission for the construction of a building to accommodate 5 apartments and 1 commercial unit at ground floor, following the demolition of the existing motor garage on site. The application was considered at the April Development Control Committee meeting, where members resolved to approve the application subject to a range of conditions. One condition required the submission of an access strategy to be submitted and improved in writing by the local planning authority. This was because the residential cycle storage could only be accessed over third-party land. Since that meeting, it has been brought to West Suffolk Council's attention that the right of access is not achievable. So as a result of this, an amended plan has been submitted which demonstrates access to the residential cycle storage without the need to cross into third-party land. The application was previously referred to Development Control Committee following the objections from Newmarket Town Council and ward member Rachel Hood, which was sort of contrary to the officer recommendation of approval. The application remains to be recommended for approval. So just a refresh really, the location plan shows the extent of the development site. It is located within the settlement boundary of Newmarket, next to Kingston Passage, which links Park Lane to Newmarket's High Street. The snippet on the right shows the site in context with its constraints. So the pink denotes that we have a range of listed buildings surrounding the site, and it is also contained within the conservation area for Newmarket. The application site is also located within the town centre boundary for Newmarket, and as such, policy DM35 deals with proposals for main town centre uses. The use classes referred to in DM35 have obviously been revoked and replaced. However, the proposed commercial unit will fall within Class E, which is considered to meet the requirements of that policy. The policy also supports the provision of residential accommodation on upper floors. So sort of taking that into consideration, paired with the provision of the residential on the upper floors with the commercial at ground floor, officers consider the scheme compliant with DM35, and therefore the principle of the development is acceptable, subject to other considerations, of course. Also touching on the emerging local plan, LP40 states that proposals will be expected to enhance the vitality, viability and overall attractiveness of the centre. It further states that proposals for residential uses will be supported in appropriate locations in the defined town centres, provided it will not be adversely impacted by the existing town centre uses. So this is the existing building on site. It's quite modest in scale. It doesn't really hold any architectural merit, and as it stands, officers are of the opinion that it doesn't make a positive contribution to the conservation area. This is the superseded block plan. So this was the plan that was considered during April's meeting. So this showed, let me just get my laser pointer. This showed that the residential cycle storage could only be accessed over third-party land, and during that meeting a condition was presented to members which sought to ensure access could be achieved via the submission of an access strategy. And obviously, as I explained earlier, the landowner was refusing to give right over the access, so that was not a viable option for the scheme. So following that, an amended plan was received on the 10th of April, which revised the access points as shown in red. The residential cycle storage can now be accessed within land owned by the applicant, and the landowner was shown this plan and given the opportunity to comment. They did question about the proposal still relying on their land. However, the access as shown is all contained within the red line, which we confirmed that via email to the landowner. We also advised that any works to the boundary would sort of fall under the Party Wall Act, and then no further response was received from the neighbouring property. So we've just got a zoomed in version of the access points. So we've got along here, we'll have a 1.8 metre high fence, short between the application site and the neighbouring plan to sort of ensure that no cars park over this 1.2 metre wide clearance to sort of allow cycles to be accessed. We can also add a condition to ensure that fencing is provided and thereafter retained. That condition doesn't form part of the condition list as contained in the committee report, but I have got a draft wording at the end of the presentation. So this section here is Kingston Passage. So this element will sort of be all paved, so the commercial can access the rear of their unit here, and then the residential in here. So that's now all contained within the red line. Just a refresh on the floor plans. So we'll have 2 apartments on the first floor, and then 2 on the second floor, and then the 5th apartment was on the ground floor with the commercial unit. These are the elevations. These remain unchanged from the previous meeting. So the top shows the front elevation as well as the street scene along Park Lane. The front elevation appears to have taken design inspiration from surrounding buildings, and the rear has sort of taken a modern approach by incorporating natural slate. Officers consider the scale of the development to respect the existing surrounding development as demonstrated within that street scene. And then the plans had been amended. Again, these were shown in the April meeting. The plans were amended to sort of address comments from the conservation officer about ensuring that the rear elevation sort of fits in with the wider street scene. Balconies have also been screened with louvres in order to sort of protect the residential amenity. And then you've got the original scheme at the top and then the amended scheme at the bottom, which was considered at April's meeting. And again, just a bit of context, this was the previously withdrawn scheme. It was for a 4-storey, 20-bedroom hotel accommodation block, which we considered this sort of out of character, large in scale, quite bulky and dominant. The conservation officer had also objected to this development, noting that it was sort of tower above the existing development. And then this is just a quick reminder of the design inspiration from the building. As discussed in the previous meeting, the red circle shows where the application site is. And then just some site photos. So this is the existing garage. We've got the sort of neighbouring listed buildings with the buildings where they've sort of taken their design inspiration from along that street scene. That's just the existing building. And then this is the rear of the site. So that property is Chudley House, which is the sort of the owner of the land where the residential cycle storage was going to be accessed from. And then again, the rear of the application site with that neighbouring property. This is the street scene. So again, this is along Park Lane. All Saints Church is just out of shot on the right. And then this is the view within the garage. So you can see that you can see Chudley House. So as a result of the development, it will sort of be bought away from that boundary of Chudley House, because I believe at the moment the buildings are sort of adjoined. And then again, that's just a zoomed out version of the relationship of the application site with Chudley House. Amenity was a matter that was raised and discussed at the last committee meeting, obviously noting the representation received from Chudley House. However, officers considered this relationship satisfactory, noting the provision of the development being located within the town centre boundary where there's a mix of commercial and retail units. As mentioned previously, balconies will include sort of timber balustrades to minimise overlooking, and the provision and retention of these can be conditioned as shown in the report. Officers therefore consider the impact on amenity acceptable. And again, this is just the application site showing the context with the church and the listed buildings. And then again, just a view down Kingston Passage, so you can just see Amatola House in shot there. And then this is sort of a wider shot looking at the application site from Park Lane. I'll just play the videos that we saw last meeting just to refresh everyone's memory. So this is just walking down Kingston Passage, obviously noting that this is where the key view is as part of Newmarket's neighbourhood plan. So you can just see the building in shot now. And then this is a video of the rear of the application site, sort of panning round towards Chudley House and the social club. And then just one of sort of the wider street scene along Park Lane. So, Newmarket Neighbourhood Plan Policy NKT2 identifies Kingston Passage looking towards All Saints Church as a key view. The Town Council have raised concern over breach of this policy within their comments. This is sort of a screenshot from the neighbourhood plan, which demonstrates that key view. Within this, the application site is just in view, sort of tucked behind the existing development. And then, again, as shown in the April meeting, this is the assessment that the applicant completed upon that key view. And again, on assessing this, officers are content that the scheme will not adversely impact negatively upon this key view, noting sort of the mix of development that we have in this area. So conservation issues were again discussed last meeting, whereby the plans show that the development will incorporate natural slate roof tiles, red facing brickwork detailing, sash style windows and buff facing brick. The balustrades will be timber clad. The design inspiration for the building has been taken from other historic buildings within the conservation area at Sun Lane and Park Lane. And again, external finishes of the materials can be conditioned as a result of an approval. And as mentioned before, the Conservation Officer has raised no objections to the scheme subject to that condition. Again, highways issues was a matter that was raised previously. And as a result of this amended plan, the judgment in that regard remains unchanged. It is a car-free scheme, but there are 12 cycle spaces still included, including electric bike charging points, and the applicant has shown that they've gone above and beyond the required cycle provision. As a result of that, Suffolk County Council have confirmed a car-free scheme acceptable, as we've got public transport links and local services available within reasonable walking distance, as well as a public car park in close proximity. Newmarket train station is approximately a 10-minute walk from the site, as well as bus stops being within a 2-minute walk. And you've also got Newmarket High Street, which is less than 100 metres from the application site. All Saints Road car park is located a short walk from the application site, and season tickets are available to purchase to accommodate parking for residents. Noise was also a concern raised via representations, and it is considered that any potential noise from the commercial unit can be effectively mitigated via conditions. Again, as explained last meeting, a condition can be added to restrict the use class to Class E, as well as restricting opening hours of that unit 8 a.m. till 6 p.m, and requiring details prior to the installation of any ventilation system, including air conditioning units and systems to control odours from any cooking process. This was just a summary of the consultation comments, which again was shown last meeting. So the Town Council have strongly objected to the scheme, given that they believe it's an overdevelopment of the site, inappropriate for the conservation area, a breach of the Newmarket Neighbourhood Plan policies, the lack of parking and lack of detail regarding the commercial unit. The representations are similar to the concerns that the Town Council had raised, and obviously we've got the full details of those contained within the officer report. And then we have no objections from Highways, the Conservation Officer, Environmental Health and Suffolk County Council Archaeology, subject to a range of conditions that are contained within the report. So to summarise, the scheme which is subject to this application is a redevelopment of a derelict motor garage within the town centre of Newmarket. The proposal incorporates a 3-storey building with 5 apartments and a commercial unit at ground floor, and as such, the principle of this use is considered acceptable. it is considered acceptable that it is considered that the redevelopment will alter the character and appearance of the area, but this is not considered to be detrimental to the street scene or character of the conservation area. This is due to the use of traditional materials incorporated into the design in order to comply with policies DM17 and NKT1 of the Newmarket Neighbourhood Plan. Whilst the scheme is car-free, adequate sustainable transport modes have been achieved by the developer, going above and beyond on the provision of cycle storage, and the development is served by sustainable transport links and is therefore considered in compliant with relevant development plan policies. Also weighing in favour of the proposal are the obvious and considerable benefits arising, including the provision of housing in a suitable location within a sustainable area of Newmarket, the biodiversity improvements, enhancements, and also the enhancement to the conservation area, as well as the short and long-term economic benefits associated with new housing. Also, given the current 5-year housing land supply, paragraph 11D of the NPPF also provides support for residential development. However, it should be noted that this is not considered to be a determinative factor in this case, given that the development is considered to accord with the development plan policies in any event. The proposal is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out within the committee report, as well as a condition requiring the 1.8 metre fencing to be provided and retained in its approved form to ensure that 1.2 metre wide clearance is kept clear for the access of cycle storage. And then this is the sort of the proposed wording of the condition in relation to that fence. So to ensure that it's provided in line with the drawing installed prior to the first occupation of the development and then retained in its approved form. So I'll pass back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Savannah. We have 2 registered speakers, Dr. Rachel Wood, and we have a recorded audio file and a backup hard copy just in case some members can't hear it. And we also have Councillor Kevin Yarrow in his capacity as a Newmarket Town Councillor. Welcome. Okay. So can we hear the recording first, please? And it will be subject to the 3-minute time slot. Okay.
I'll start with 3 issues which I hope you'll support should you approve this application. First, the developer initially stated that 3 Swift boxes and 1 bat box would be included, which is great. However, the design and access statement later seeks exemption from the need for the 10% biodiversity net gain. So please could you clarify that these boxes or bricks will still be included? The site's really important for swifts, a Suffolk priority species, so this would be a significant win. It would comply with policy NKT 16 and also it's quite straightforward for the developer. Another straightforward requirement is ensuring that the lime tree just south of the site is not damaged in building works. This tree forms part of the neighbourhood plan's Key View 20. The third requirement is for an archaeological survey. This site was part of the palace complex of Kings James I and Charles I, so it's nationally significant. We need to take the chance to explore it and to use what we find to attract visitors to West Suffolk. If there's no archaeological survey, we won't be complying with the Newmarket Conservation Area Appraisal, nor with policy DM20/LP 55 on archaeology. So this is important. Now I'm going to ask you to consider some changes. There are problems with the height, mass and severe uninterrupted straight lines of the proposal. The adjacent Grade 2 listed cottage will be swamped and the new building will intrude on the prospects of both Palace Street and Kingston Passage, which are both neighbourhood plan key views and classified in the Conservation Area Appraisal as of very high significance. This building will be seen by visitors to the National Horse Racing Museum, including its patron, the Queen, and all the media. Shouldn't we want it to be as attractive as possible? Changing the severe roofline and making the corner with Kingston Passage echo the nearby angled corner of Victoria House on Sun Lane could make a huge difference. Finally, please consider parking. Policy LP60 allows for a reduced level of car parking in town centres, but it never suggested that there should be no parking. You just can't rely on public transport in Newmarket. For example, Newmarket and Ely are towns of like size and distance to Cambridge, but there are nearly 4 times as many trains from Ely to Cambridge. And while 44% of all journeys from Ely to Cambridge are made by train, it's just 4% from Newmarket. Even within the town, the major supermarket, the only source of items like school clothing, is beyond reasonable walking distance. The occupiers of these flats will need cars, and so this proposal will exacerbate existing on-road parking problems. Thank you very much for listening.
Right, thank you for that. Councillor Kevin Yarrow, on behalf of Newmarket Town Council. You've got 3 minutes, Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to address you. I'm speaking as a representative of Newmarket Town Council and on behalf of some concerned Newmarket residents, of which I am one. Now, the cycle access corridor has been addressed in the updated plans, but that brings me to my first point. There is no available parking for cars, and it's naive or ill-informed to suppose that potential residents will not have cars. Newmarket is not a large urban community. It has limited and unreliable public transport. To get to work outside Newmarket on time by public transport is difficult and at times impossible, if it's not to Cambridge or Bury. There are no buses on Sundays, and they don't operate late in the evenings. You might recall that in Newmarket, a few years ago, we experienced a period of time when some major bus routes were totally withdrawn, and we became quite isolated. Now, of the trains, as confirmed by Dr. Wood, an insignificant percentage of Newmarket to Cambridge journeys are by train, and that compares very unfavourably with Bury or Ely. But then if you consider actually the provision of trains and the timing of trains through Newmarket, it's not surprising. Point 2, I want to do again with the key views from Kingston Passage. They should not be dismissed too readily. By lifting the roof line above the current height, as is proposed, which currently is in line with the listed Grade 2 neighbouring houses numbers 4 and 6, it will actually visually squeeze the view of All Saints Church, diminish the appearance of numbers 4 and 6 Park Lane, and entirely cover that of the large lime tree which features in our neighbourhood plan, View 20. Unfortunately, in the video, it wasn't in full leaf as it is now, and it looks terrific. My third concern, like Dr. Wood, is one of archaeology. The site is a conservation area and is part of the palace complex of King James I and King Charles I. It was purchased by the Crown, and it became at times a seat of national government and of the court. All the more reason, therefore, to develop this site with extreme diligence, with an eye to its significant history and consequently a reappraisal of the visual appearance, which must be in sympathy with its historic neighbours. You will be aware of further and more erudite observations from residents such as Dr. Wood and the resident of neighbouring Chudley House, who will be overlooked by the proposed flats, which is a consequence of overdevelopment of this site, which allows for few open areas. Policy CS5 states that all new development should be designed to a high quality.
Kevin, I'm sorry to interrupt. You've reached over 3 minutes. Can you just give us a final sentence, please?
Final sentence. I request the committee revisits this decision. Indeed, it's commendable the developers come up with a better scheme, but it should not be judged in the context of the former totally unacceptable proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Right, as the usual courtesy, Councillor Hood, would you like to address the committee in your capacity as a committee member?
Very much, yes. I would just like to confirm something with the planning officer, which is that this committee is revisiting the whole of this application. I just want that clarified and I don't want people to be under the misapprehension that it's just to do with the cycle access. So could we just have that confirmed, and then I can address people?
Okay, we'll take that one question straight away. Thank you.
Yep, we have brought the whole item back before members. Clearly, members discussed this at length previously, and the reason why it has come back is because of the changes to the cycle access. But legally, you have to consider the whole thing as a whole and reach a decision. You can't just make a decision on a narrow point, because it's not an amendment to a permission. There was a resolution previously, but we haven't actually granted an application. If you had an application back with a variation, then you'd be just looking at that variation. You are looking at the whole scheme and reaching a view on it. But obviously, the matter that we've drawn to your attention following the preceding debate was to change to that access.
Thank you, Penny.
Okay, so thank you for confirming that the committee is now able to revisit the previous discussion. And I would like to draw the committee's attention to the very compelling statement by Dr. Wood and by Councillor Yarrow. So I've always said that I find it essential that this committee listens to the views of the local people. And it was pretty disappointing last time that the clear comments from the town council appeared just to be swept aside. So at least we have the opportunity to look at this matter again. Now, people who went on the site visit will know that this building, this proposal, is very close to the National Horse Racing Museum. That area is a conservation area. Admittedly, what is being proposed is less bad than the previous hideous carbuncle of a hotel, but I don't think, and in fact, it is not that we are looking at. What we are looking at is Newmarket Town Council and Newmarket Neighbourhood Plan members' very clear view that this is damaging to the conservation area. The more I've read the comments, with the greatest of respect to Savannah, all the positives mentioned are officers believe this, officers believe that, and our officers are very professional. However, the members of Newmarket Town Council, the residents, Dr. Wood, completely disagree. We accept the principle of development here, but this is not the right development. It's overdevelopment. The pictures we've seen on the screen do not, in my view, and in the views we've heard from Dr. Wood and Councillor Yarrow, make this development an enhancement to the conservation area. It's very clear that the parking, saying that people won't have cars is a nonsense. On that issue alone, this should be rejected. And I was surprised it wasn't last time. But more than that, this is clearly an overdevelopment. Residents of Newmarket went to a lot of trouble to produce a neighbourhood plan. There is no doubt that this is damaging to the key views, and that's very clear. So it will be contrary to the neighbourhood plan if it's approved. And in addition to that, the so-called design inspiration, I find that phrase unfortunate, doesn't comply with the need to enhance the conservation area. So I realise that last time my words fell on stony ground, and so did the other the person who came from Newmarket Town Council, our views appeared to be completely ignored. So I would ask that perhaps my colleagues are able to revisit this and accept the view that it contravenes the Newmarket Neighbourhood Plan. The proposal contravenes the Newmarket Neighbourhood Plan. There is no parking, and the view of the people who live here is that this will be detrimental to the conservation area. Just adding, I hope that what has been said today will be listened to. People don't go to the trouble of coming to these committees and making these statements unless it's considered to be really important. Newmarket is very historic in this particular area, which brings me to the situation I hope we're not going to get to. But if we do get to the situation where colleagues choose to ignore the submission I'm making, that this needs to be turned down on the basis of overdevelopment, the fact it doesn't enhance the conservation area, the parking issues, the Newmarket Neighbourhood Plan. I could go on, I have gone on, but it is essential that we have this biodiversity issues addressed, the swift boxes, and that the lime tree's not damaged. And as Councillor Yarrow said, an archaeological survey is essential, not least because the Palace of King Charles II used to extend all over this area. So why anybody would think that we don't need an archaeological survey is beyond me. So hopefully we won't get to that point, but if we do, I endorse what has been said by our two speakers in relation to biodiversity gain, net gain, and the archaeological survey. Thank you very much for listening, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Hood. Councillor Glossop, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a little bit confused because I've sat on this committee now for over 10 years. I've never known where we have, at the last meeting, we spoke for a long, long time on this application. All the things that have been said before are being said again today. And we were told as committee members, we were having to come to this meeting again because of the problem of not having access to the bicycle storage. So I can't see how this is fair because we have lots of applications that are turned down and they don't have a chance to come back and have a second bite. So I'm really very, very confused about this. We should have been told then, when we were written to that we'd got this meeting again, that we were going to be looking at the whole application again, and we weren't told that. And I'm finding this quite odd and quite confusing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glossop. Councillor Armitage, please.
Chair, I'm really interested in the comments and much appreciated. However, and I'll try and be brief because I'm sure it's been discussed at length. I think the term gross overdevelopment is such a subjective thing that it's certainly not my opinion that this is gross overdevelopment. A question, could the conditions include accommodation for bats and swifts and an archaeological survey? That's a question. For parking, I'm pleased there's no parking provision. I think we're far too reliant on cars. We're talking about 5 units, 5 cars probably at most, with a car park nearby. And can I commend the inspiration? I'm glad it's not based on the existing garage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armitage. Councillor Neal, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I disagree totally with everything that was just said there, which might be a surprise to some people. I'm glad the whole thing is coming back. I think we need to look at it in its entirety. Last time there was an awful lot of assumptions made, even the fact that everyone who occupied these dwellings was going to be working in the high street. It's accepted that transport from Newmarket out of town is very poor. Public transport is very, very poor. And also reflecting on the previous meeting, and it wasn't examined deep enough and nobody came back from the applicant themselves regarding an issue with an internal lift. So I would I'd wonder if that could be revisited, which if we didn't look at it in its entirety, then we wouldn't be able to do that, would we? But I do see it as an overdevelopment of the site. I do see it as a building that doesn't fit in with anything along there. It's not in keeping with anything. And across the road there's a church, and to me it's just too overbearing. So I see it as an overdevelopment. I do feel that the assumption that everyone who's going to live there is going to have a bicycle and is going to work in the town. I think there's too many assumptions being made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neal. Councillor Holder, please.
Oh, I wasn't expecting that.
Sorry to wake you up,
Yeah.
Councillor Holder.
Well, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have listened to the tape, which I thought was very good, very well put together, bringing the points together. I'm interested to hear the answer to the question about archaeology. I think probably there's an awful lot being made on that that's not really necessary. I've listened to the Town Council again and more or less repeated what was said before in a different format. And Councillor Hood, who, as usual, spoke very eloquently over this one. However, sort of cutting to the chase, despite what our officer says, we are treating this as a completely new application, which I do understand the reasoning behind it. However, we've been through it, and thank the officer for the report again, in our papers. And I was at the site visit, and I was at the last meeting, and I said my piece then. And I'm quite happy with conditions and subject to what our officers say about the bats and the swifts and the archaeology as maybe extra conditions. I'm quite happy with the current conditions. I would, move approval of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holder. Is there a seconder for that, please? I'll take Councillor Armitage, who just beat you, Councillor Ball. Okay, I've just got notes here about swifts and bats and lime tree and things of that nature. So, Savannah, please.
Thank you. So within the committee report, we do have conditions which require the submission of biodiversity enhancement. So that's condition 14. So that requires the developer to submit details of bird boxes, bat boxes, swift boxes, bricks, anything like that. So if permission was granted, we'd attach that condition as set out within the report. They would then at a later date have to discharge that condition, which would go forward to our ecology consultant for comments. As part of the application, they did submit a biodiversity survey, which has been assessed. And as a result, we have condition 15 in place, which requires them to comply with the findings of that report, methodology, etc. In relation to archaeology, we have condition 22 and 23 in place. 22 requires the submission of a written scheme of investigation prior to the commencement of the development. So essentially a programme of any archaeological work. There's a list contained within that condition which details what they will need to do prior to the commencement of the development. That sort of links into condition 23, which is the site investigation and post-investigation. Those conditions were recommended by Suffolk County Council Archaeology. So again, if permission was approved, they would then have to submit those details prior to commencement of the development, which would then be further assessed by the Suffolk County Council Archaeological team. The development is considered to be BNG exempt because there is no loss of habitat on this site. But obviously, to comply with our duty under the NERC Act, we have imposed the conditions in relation to the enhancements, as I said, bat boxes, bird boxes, etc. I think that was everything. Oh, sorry, and the lift situation. So as sort of explained last committee meeting, obviously the design and access statement made reference to a lift, but the floor plans didn't. that was an oversight, and there is no lift as part of the proposal. And really quickly, the lime tree, we believe that's got there's a satisfactory distance from the development and the lime tree to not adversely impact that.
And I just wanted to come back again in terms of clarifying about what we're looking at today, because I've just had a quick word with legal, and I know this is something our legal officers had considered as well. There have been recent case law decisions that make it really clear that when an item is returning to committee, that it does have to be considered fully. You can't sort of see it as a separate continuation, particularly when you have different members present, which obviously we do have a different substitute today. So in order for this decision, whatever that decision may be that members reach today, in order for it to be legally sound, I appreciate, particularly when a committee comes straight on the back of another one, it can feel slightly frustrating, but it does mean that we are reaching a legally robust decision, and one that wouldn't be subject, one would hope, to any further legal challenge, which obviously nobody would want to see. So that's why we have to go through the whole process.
Thank you, officers. Councillor Hood, please.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to clarify something, a couple of things. One, Councillor Armitage was possibly a bit confused because he kept using this expression, gross overdevelopment. But actually, what the Town Council and I am saying is that this is an overdevelopment. I don't quite know where the terminology gross came from, but nobody's saying it's a gross overdevelopment. I have to say the previous submission certainly was a gross overdevelopment, but in my view, this is overdevelopment. So just to clarify that. And then secondarily, in light of Councillor Glossop's comment that she's been on the committee for 10 years, but didn't realise that we were actually revisiting this entire application, but we are, that seems to be, having made that statement, it's just a bit confusing as to how we can opine on it if people are confused as what they're supposed to have been doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Neil, again, please.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the lift scenario, so are we saying that this development, there's no opportunity for people with disability? Are we excluding people with disability that would require a lift? And if there's no lift, that obviously the assumption is they're excluded from tenancy.
Thank you, Councillor Neil. Councillor Armitage. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just to revise my previous comment, can I say that overdevelopment is also subjective and a matter of opinion? And in my opinion, this is not overdevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armitage.
Just to confirm in relation to the lift, there's sort of two separate bits to how we look at accessibility, and some of that is covered by planning and some is controlled by building regulations. So generally, in considering a planning application, we're duty bound by the Equalities Act as a public body, and we would consider things generally from a planning point of view. But what we can't do at the planning stage is impose requirements that would be more onerous than those that would be secured through the building regulations, which would be the appropriate legal route through which you secure the sort of building level design requirements. For a building of this nature, a lift wouldn't be required. There will be other things that it's Part M that they would have to comply with, particularly in relation to the commercial element, but we wouldn't be able to extend beyond our planning powers to require them to include elements in this building that would go beyond what would be required by the building regulations.
Thank you very much indeed, Penny. I've got no other members indicating they wish to speak, so it's Councillor Hood.
To what my point about Councillor Glossop not being understanding that this was being revisited in its entirety. And I don't know if other members thought that, but I mean, that was a comment you made, so that needs to be addressed.
I did clarify a second time just to be sure, and wanted to make sure that members were clear for the rationale behind. My understanding of everyone knew that that's what we were considering, what they were querying was the rationale behind that. Hence the reason I came back with a further comment just clarifying in relation to the case law around this matter and why it is so important that we are considering the whole application before us and not a second point. So I'm happy that that's been very, very clear now for members considering this application today.
Thank you, Penny. Councillor Ball, please.
Sorry, you'd think I'd know by now, wouldn't you? I don't think Councillor Glossop is alone in assuming we were just looking at that condition, but it has been very clearly made to us that we have to look at it all again. It does seem like a second bite at the cherry, but that is the situation, and I think that's the way we're looking at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Chair. If we wasn't looking at the whole application again, then really we would be coming back with predetermined, really, I would have thought. So I think it's important that we are doing it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Neil. Okay, that ends my list of members, unless anyone wants to press their microphone. Good. Let's go for the proposal that's been made. Councillor Holder proposed approval in line with the officer's recommendation of approval, and that was duly seconded by Councillor Armitage. Can I see a show of hands in favour of approval of the application, please? And those against, please?
Okay, so that's 12 votes in favour and 2 votes against. The motion is carried and the application is approved.
Thank you very much indeed, Claire and members. That ends the formal agenda, but I just have to remind members that there is actually a further training session